Welcome back to the deep dive. It is Sunday, February 1st, 2026.
It is.
And I have to say, looking at the calendar and then, scrolling through my news feed, it feels like we're living in a bit of a split screen reality right now.
It certainly does. It's a strange, disjointed moment.
Yeah, because on one side you have the global headlines, trade wars escalating, tech bubbles looking like they're about to pop.
The whole geopolitical temperature is freezing cold.
Exactly. But then you look at the other side of the screen, specifically at the Indian economy, and the numbers. They just seem to be defying all that gloom.
They are, and that is exactly what we're unpacking today. We've got the Economic Survey of India 2025-26 right here in front of us.
Released just a couple of days ago, right? January 29th.
That's the one from the Department of Economic Affairs.
Now, usually when a government department drops a big PDF like this, it's a cure for insomnia. I was expecting page after page of dry stats.
And you'd usually be right, but this one, it reads less like a bureaucratic report and more like a screenplay about survival.
A screenplay.
It really does. It's about resilience against what the document literally calls a hostile global environment.
Hostile is a strong word for a government report.
It is, but it fits. I mean, our mission for this deep dive is to figure out how India is managing to clock growth over 7% while the world is, well, effectively on fire.
And we have to talk about that AI-driven financial crash risk they mentioned.
Oh, absolutely. And there's a fascinating philosophical question in here, too, about choosing long-term well-being over short-term pleasure.
Okay, so let's start with the big picture, this massive paradox.
Yes, the global paradox of 2025, as the survey calls it. It paints a picture of an Indian economy with its strongest macroeconomic performance in decades.
Right. Fiscal deficit's down, corporate balance sheets are clean.
Investment is flowing. But, and this is the core tension, it's all happening in a global system that has just stopped working.
Wait, hold on. Stopped working. What does that mean? I thought if you run a tight ship, the global economy rewards you. You get stable currency, capital flows.
And for 30 years, that was the deal. But the survey argues that in 2025, that deal expired. The rules just, they broke. You can be doing everything right at home, and the global system can still hammer you with these arbitrary shocks.
Nothing illustrates that better than what happened with the United States last year.
Exactly.
I mean, if you were watching the markets in, April 2025, you remember the headline. The U.S. president announced a 25% reciprocal tariff on India.
And the consensus at the time was, okay, this is just a negotiation tactic.
Right. Everyone assumed they'd sit down, lower the temperature, and the tariffs would drop in a few weeks.
But reality went completely the other way.
It did. In August 2025, instead of a deal, the U.S. administration announced an additional 25% punitive tariff.
On most Indian goods. A real double whammy.
So that should have tanked the growth number.
In a fragile economy, it would have. And look, to be fair, growth estimates were revised down, the rupee took a hit, but this is the resilience part. The actual growth momentum didn't collapse.
The domestic engine just kept running.
It did. The structural reforms kept things strong, even while exports were getting squeezed.
Okay, so the political relationship is falling off a cliff. Usually when that happens, money runs away, investors get scared.
Right.
But 2025 broke that rule too, because while the diplomats were fighting, the accountants, they were actually impressed.
That's a great way to put it, because despite the tariffs, 2025 saw 3 major agencies upgrade India's credit rating.
Morningstar DBRS in May.
Then S&P upgraded India to BBB right around that second tariff shock in August, and R&I followed in September.
I want to pause on that S&P upgrade to BBB. I mean, they are notoriously stingy with these things.
It was historic. The first upgrade from S&P in nearly 2 decades.
Wow.
Think about the signal that sends. The political trade environment is hostile, yet the financial assessors are looking at the books and saying, actually, this is solid.
It just highlights that disconnect we started with. Okay, so that was 2025. But the survey is looking ahead to now, to 2026. And they've laid out 3 scenarios.
Yeah, and it feels a bit like a choose-your-own-adventure book, but, with much higher stakes.
And none of the adventures are particularly relaxing.
Not at all. Let's run through them. Scenario 1 is the status quo.
Okay, and they give this, a 45% probability?
About that,
Yeah.
And this is basically just more of the same. The world stays fragile, insecure, but manageable.
So governments are constantly intervening, firefighting just to keep things stable.
Exactly. It's not a collapse, but it's an exhausting, expensive way to run a planet.
Okay, scenario 2. Disorderly multipolar fragmentation.
Also, a 40 to 45% probability. And this is a darker turn.
How so?
Strategic rivalries get worse. The Russia-Ukraine conflict remains unresolved. But the key is that trade becomes a weapon.
So supply chains get reconfigured based on politics, not efficiency.
Precisely. You stop buying from the cheapest supplier and start buying from the friendliest one. That just drives inflation up and growth down for everybody.
And then there's scenario 3, the systemic shock cascade.
This is the one that keeps central bankers awake at night.
The probability is lower, right? 10 to 20%.
It is, but the impact would be catastrophic. The survey warns that this isn't just one thing going wrong. It's a chain reaction. A geopolitical crisis triggers a financial crash, which triggers a tech collapse.
And this is where we have to talk about the tech bubble, because the survey gets very, very specific here.
It does. It points to a specific report from the Financial Times on Christmas Eve, 2025.
What did it say?
It said that tech companies had moved over $120 billion of data center spending off their balance sheets.
Okay, hold on. Off-balance sheet is one of those finance terms that always sounds boring but usually hides something dangerous.
It's a huge red flag.
What does that mean in plain English?
I mean, imagine you want to buy an incredibly expensive, risky sports car, but you don't want your spouse to see the loan on your joint bank account.
Okay.
So you create a separate little company, take a huge loan out in that company's name, and buy the car. Technically, the debt isn't on your personal statement.
But you're still on the hook if you can't make the payments.
Exactly. And that's what's happening. These tech giants are using special-purpose vehicles, SPVs, funded by Wall Street debt, to build all this massive AI infrastructure. They're hiding the risk to keep their stock prices looking pretty.
That has some serious 2008 vibes to it.
The parallel is hard to ignore. And the survey points out there's growing skepticism that the AI bet will even pay off quickly. It even quotes the IBM CEO.
Wait, the CEO of IBM said that from inside the house?
From inside the house, questioning the economic viability of large language models.
So you've got $120 billion in hidden debt, skepticism about the product, and this is the kicker, I'm guessing, interest rates are high.
That's the kicker. The survey mentions Japanese government bond yields spiking. The era of cheap money is over. So if that bubble bursts, the liquidity dries up.
And when liquidity dries up in the West, emerging markets like India get hit with the splash damage.
That is the systemic shock cascade.
It's a terrifying prospect. So, facing all this, tariffs, fragmentation, these hidden debt bubbles, what's the strategy? The survey uses a metaphor. Run a marathon and a sprint at the same time.
It's a powerful image, isn't it? Because usually you do one or the other. You pace yourself or you burn all your energy for speed.
But the argument is India doesn't have the luxury of choosing. We need the stamina for the long-term chaos, but we need the speed to catch up before the window closes.
That's the logic. And to pull that off, the survey talks about the entrepreneurial state. This draws on the work of economist Mariana Mazzucato.
Right, she's the one who argues the state was basically the original venture capitalist for things like the internet and GPS.
Correct. And the survey applies this to India. It's not state capitalism where the government runs the factories. It's about the state acting as a risk taker for huge missions.
So like the semiconductor mission.
Exactly. Building a chip fab costs billions and takes years to see a profit. A private company looking at quarterly results might say, that's too risky.
The return on investment takes too long.
Right, so the entrepreneurial state steps in. It provides the subsidies, the land, the infrastructure to de-risk that initial phase. It signals, we're going there, come with us.
And speaking of hardware versus software, there's a fascinating debate in here about manufacturing versus services. The data shows services are winning, hands down.
The numbers are stark. I mean, over the last 5 years, services exports grew at 9.4% annually. Goods exports, just 6.4%.
Okay, so play devil's advocate for me. If services are booming, why not just go all in on that? Why bother with messy, difficult factories? Why fight the tide?
That is the temptation. But the survey gives a very specific, almost counterintuitive reason why you can't. It calls it the forcing function of manufacturing.
A forcing function.
Yeah, think about what those two industries need. If you run a software company, you can bypass a lot of India's legacy problems. You get your own generator, a satellite link for internet.
You can create your own little island of efficiency.
You can. And you deliver your product by email. But if you run a factory, you can't email a car. You can't download a chemical shipment. You need physical roads. You need a port. You need grid power 24/7. Manufacturing forces the government to improve logistics, infrastructure, and state capacity.
So What you're saying is services allowed the state to be lazy, but manufacturing demands that it be efficient.
In a nutshell, yes. The survey argues it's the only way to drag the entire system, roads, power, regulations, up to global standards.
That's a brilliant way to put it. Let's look at the scoreboard for a second. The internal health looks pretty good too, right?
It does. The fiscal deficit target for FY26 is 4.4%. And you have to remember, back in FY21, that number was 9.2%.
Wow, cutting it in half.
It's a massive achievement. Inflation is largely controlled. Corporate balance sheets are cleaner than they've been in a decade.
So good grades on the report card.
Yeah.
But then there's a number in here that's, well, it's humbling. The power gap.
Yes. This comes from the Lowy Institute's Asia Power Index. And frankly, it might be the most important number in the whole document.
India's score is minus 4.0. That sounds bad, but what does it actually measure?
So think of it like a conversion rate. The Lowy Institute looks at your inputs, your population, your economic size, your military budget. That's your potential power.
Okay.
Then it looks at your outputs, your diplomatic influence, your cultural reach, your actual real-world clout.
So it's potential versus performance.
Correct. And a score of minus a 4.0 means there's a massive leakage between India's raw potential and its actual influence.
And how does that compare to other countries in Asia?
It's the lowest score in Asia, excluding Russia and North Korea.
Ouch. Okay, that really puts the sprint requirement into perspective. We have all the ingredients, but we aren't baking the cake fast enough.
Exactly. And closing that gap isn't just about GDP. It's about how people live.
Which brings us to the section on jobs and urbanization. The survey says larger factories are growing faster than smaller ones. Why does that specific detail matter?
Because size matters for wages. In India, small often means informal, low-paying, and insecure. Large factories pay better, they have higher productivity, they offer social security. It's a sign of a maturing economy.
And all these people need places to live. There's a section on the Namafharat trains, the RRTS.
The Regional Rapid Transit System, yeah. It's pitched as a model for networks of networks. Instead of everyone crushing the center of a city, you connect the surrounding regions with high-speed rail.
But there's a warning here, too. The survey talks about invisible cracks in our cities.
This is the soft infrastructure. You can build the trains and the towers, but do you have a social contract? Do you have civic order? If the streets are unsafe or governance is broken, you have invisible cracks.
It's interesting that an economic document is talking about social contracts. It feels like they're trying to address the soul of the economy, not just the skeleton.
Which leads perfectly to the closing thought of the survey. And honestly, this is where it gets surprisingly philosophical. It ends with a Sanskrit concept. The choice between Shreya and Preya.
I have to admit, when I saw Sanskrit in an economic survey, I was a bit skeptical. But break it down for us.
Yeah, it comes from the Katha Upanishad. So think of it like diet versus candy. Preya is the candy bar. It's what is pleasant. It gives you a sugar rush, immediate gratification, but then you crash.
So in economic terms, Preya is populist spending, a debt-fueled boom.
Exactly. It's the AI bubble we talked about, looking good on the surface but hollow inside. It's handing out freebies today instead of building roads for tomorrow. It feels good now, but it hurts later.
And Shreya.
Shreya is eating your vegetables and going to the gym. It's what is good. It's beneficial in the long run, even if it's difficult or boring right now.
So that's the fiscal discipline, the hard work of building manufacturing capacity.
That's it. So the survey is essentially telling the country, the world is chasing Preya quick wins, bubbles, protectionism.
Yeah.
But India has to choose Shreya.
Investing in long-term capacity. Running the marathon, it's asking everyone to delay gratification for more permanent well-being.
That is the core message.
It's a bold ask in modern politics, though. We're all wired for the sugar rush.
We are. But remember those scenarios. The fragmentation, the potential shocks. If you're living on a diet of Preya, when that shock hits, you collapse. Choosing Shreya is the only way to build the resilience to survive.
And it's the only way to close that negative 4.0 power gap.
Precisely. You can't fake strategic influence. You have to build it brick by brick.
That really ties it all together. From the U.S. tariffs to the AI debt to how we build our cities, it's all about the stamina to choose the hard path.
It is.
So here's the thought I want to leave you with today. The survey says India is running a marathon at a sprint pace. We know we're underperforming our potential by that score of negative 4.0. My question is, how long can a country sprint a marathon before it either closes the gap or runs out of breath?
That is the trillion-dollar question.
We'll serve that one up for you to chew on. Thanks for listening to this deep dive into the 2026 Economic Survey. We'll see you in the next one.